Oh my
Dave, what are you doing?
Oh, Ted, I was just looking for some D&D memes to post on our Facebook page. This stuff is hilarious.
Do you want to share them then?
Sure, Ted, let's go over our top 5 picks for D&D memes. Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and today, as always, I'm hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
Hey, maybe it's your first time hanging out in Ted's basement. It's a place where we like to talk about news, views, and homebrews for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Sometimes we even talk about other role-playing games.
So if you don't want to miss a single video, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button and attune to that notification bell.
So, as YouTubers with a lot of social media and, really entrenched in the D&D community, I feel like part of that culture is D&D memes. It's huge. It's been around for a while now. Since the beginning of the internet, memes started popping up, right? And the thing that's great about Dungeons & Dragons memes is a lot of this stuff is based off of experiences a lot of us have had. And I think that's why they're so funny, because that's the common thread that we can all kind of relate to.
That relation. There's so many times that you come upon a meme that if you share it to somebody who doesn't play this wonderful game, they're just like, well, what does that mean? They don't get it. What's a mimic? What do you mean you walk in a room and cast fireball? They just don't understand. But for, us, we've been playing, 20, 30 years apiece, here. And we know all of these things. We've had all of these vast experiences playing this game.
Memes in Dungeons & Dragons are almost like this comedic archive since the beginning of the game for the past 50 years that have been springing up, at people's tables, right, when they get together to play. But it's not just D&D. It kind of spread out. It's how many times you're sitting there, you're hanging out with all your friends and you're playing Dungeons & Dragons, and then all of a sudden, boom, someone drops the Monty Python reference, or a gamer's reference. It's all these things that have kind of been collected into D&D. Some of them have sprung from D&D and then they get pulled back in. It's a lot of fun, and it just adds another level of community and shared experience that we all can kind of enjoy together. Sometimes now it's just oh, you're on social media and you either make or find this funny meme to post up, and your friends all over the world, they're going to get it because they're gamers. They play D&D.
Absolutely. I look at this stuff and I look at this great community, and we're heavily entrenched in social media. As you said, we share a lot of that stuff out, on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and it's there. But we've been doing this for years. So it's all right, can we take and figure out what's going to be the best? Have we been doing this for this long?
I don't know if we can find the best, but we can sure find our favorites. So we're going to break them down into 5 different categories.
Let's break down these categories, and then we'll get into the specifics of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one is that player. I don't think we really need to explain this one because everyone had to deal with or has had that player at their table.
Next up is going to be monster. How many times, has there been a monster that's created specifically for D&D that only D&D players know?
And there's plenty of them that are iconic.
Absolutely.
Next up is spell. You can't play D&D without casting spells. So we felt like that's a pretty iconic thing for a Dungeons & Dragons player and fan. It deserved its own category.
We talked about relationships, so we've categorized the next one as relatable. There's so many experiences that we have playing this game that we thought it would be really important to make one the typical D&D player just knows.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't matter if you've met a person or not. You guys and gals can have the same shared experience no matter what, because you guys and gals are gamers.
So what's our last category, Dave?
Lastly, we have that DM, and it basically is kind of an extension of that player because we all know what it's about.
Absolutely. So we've got some really great memes that we're going to share here, and you'll have to let us know whether you agree or whether you disagree.
But before we do, we want to tell you about something really special that we have going on. Speaking of memes, we post a ton of memes over on our Facebook page, but that's not the only place you can find us.
For instance, we're running games of D&D over in England in a castle. We still have a couple spots left if you want to live a D&D vacation with Nerdarchy.
Yep, check that out down in the description below. Now we're going to jump into the specific memes, and we are going to start with that player. This is one of my favorites because I've definitely played with this player enough times. I didn't ask how big the room was. I said I cast Fireball.
This is one of those things, you know, you've all seen those players who they don't care what's going on. They said they looked in a room, they saw they were monsters, and they drop a fireball. You know, fireballs are one of those things that it just solves all the problems, right?
Not only that, though, we have heard players say hit points are a resource.
That is entirely true. All right, so the next one up is Monster, and you know this one happens to be one of my favorites. That monster, of course, is going to be the Mimic. So the barkeeper asked us why we carried weapons on us in the bar. I said mimics. The barkeeper laughed. The party laughed. The table laughed. We killed the table. It was a good time.
Absolutely. Mimic is such an iconic monster in Dungeons & Dragons. The idea, you know, that you could be anywheres and it could be anything is amazing. And it's just funny because adventurers are just paranoid about everything, and there's a reason it's called mimics.
So, you know, one of my favorite monsters, I've used them in a large variety of ways, even gone against the norm and had an NPC that was friendly towards the party that was a mimic. It's great.
Well, I will say back at AD&D, there was a more intelligent version of the mimic, so it's definitely a possibility. So next up, we have the spell meme. This one is classic because the spell it's referencing is classic. The Necromancer is a classic wizard throughout the ages of D&D, no matter what version you're playing. So that meme, why all the hate towards Necromancers? Can't a guy just raise a family in peace?
Necromancers are awesome. You know, people have been playing them for years. And when you get into the whole puns of, you know, raise versus raise, it definitely works for me. I love this one, and I still chuckle hilariously when it comes up.
And it also plays on, are they evil? Are they not evil? Is it a bad thing to animate the dead? I don't know. You decide.
Our next meme is going to be relatable. As I said earlier, all of the shared experiences of D&D really open things up to, you know, something that we can all share. And, you know, in this particular one, I think there's so many D&D players out there who have come across this. It's funny, but at the same time, you know, you might want to shed a single tear from, you know, what happens. So here it is. You know, you've got one side, the swear jar with a little bit of money in it, and the other jar has making D&D characters you'll never play jar. That's obviously quite full.
It is a pain that we can all share. Some of us just love making characters, but we don't always have games to play them in.
To me, you know, playing characters that, or making characters that I've played for a single, you know, one shot, or made characters that I'm like, hey, you know, this would be really great, and then I never have a campaign to run them. It hurts even more, like when we do these, you know, videos on character builds, I'm like, I want to play that, but I don't have a campaign lined up anywhere in the near future that I can do so. So yeah, my jar would be full.
Absolutely. Or, you know, games just pop up that those characters don't fit, and you have to, well, make a new character.
Make a new character.
All right, final, last but not least, that DM. Random encounters. Just stop rolling already, damn it!
Random encounters are awesome, and, you know, 5th edition has kind of moved away from the whole unbalanced encounter, and that sometimes, you know, you shouldn't be fighting things that are outside of your league, or at least that's, you know, the vantage point of, you know, many DMs that are out there. But I can tell you in the early days, that was not the case. You definitely had to, you know, kind of size things up and say, should I or shouldn't I?
Yeah, 1E and 2E, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, it was just whatever lived in that area, that was on the chart. With 3rd edition D&D, it moved more into fair and balanced encounters. 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, as well as 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, definitely carried those forward.
So, you know, here, you know, you've got this picture of, you know, the party surrounded by shields because, you know, something way bigger, you know, than what they can handle is, you know, pushing them towards the edge of a cliff. And it's like, please, we just want to live.
Well, yeah, and it kind of harkens back to the idea of, you know, the DMs are just kind of like slaves to the dice and the material they were written. This would probably be the hallmark of a killer GM back in the day for sure. And also the idea that, you know, when you do things randomly, sometimes the dice just freaking hate you. And you're just gonna, you know, you set 4 watches, you made 4 rolls, and they all came up random encounters. So it's gonna be a rough night. And at that point, you know, especially if you've already had a full day adventuring as a player, as the party, you're like, please, Dungeon Master, just stop rolling.
The style of GMing definitely, you know, harkens to, as Dave says, that killer GM. That one is like, you know what? I'm just going to do whatever the dice say. That can be harsh. And that is one of that DM.
So the question is, what are some of your favorite memes? Feel free to tell us all about them down in the comments below. But hey, before we head on out of here, let me invite you to join the Nerdarchy Adventuring Party over on Patreon. Hey, Ted, you want to tell them about it?
Every month, we are creating products for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons for players and DMs alike.
Not only that, automatically our patrons get entered into our monthly giveaways.
But that's not all. We're also having a weekly hangout with our patrons.
Until next time, stay nerdy.